Hello everyone! How are you guys doing today? So we're going to continue our Xenoblade Name That Motherfucking Driver part. This is part 2. And we're going to cover some more blades. And I think the perfect one to start with is Ursula.
We are Ursula's New Groove! Ursula's New Groove! Ursula's New Groove! And we'll do what we can!
Okay. Sorry. I was just remembering her affinity chart. If you played the game, or if you've done her affinity chart, you know what I'm talking about. She has the worst affinity chart in the fucking game, son. It is bad. It is bad. And there was so much trauma, but that's not the point. We're here to talk about who Ursula's driver canonically would be. So, for those who don't know and want a basic description of Ursula, Ursula is like this cute little girl who, for some reason, gives you the ability. It trips me out of all the weapons in the game I thought she would be. A healer is her class. That's perfectly cool. But she's the one that gives you the fucking fist. The girl who's like fucking, what, like 3 to 4 feet tall and hangs out with a giant polar bear and sits in his lap and plays music is the girl who, for some reason, her weapon class is the fucking fist. Okay. But yeah, her general blade quest and her personality is that she's very swat. She's very swite. What's that? Sweet and white? Oh no! But her general personality is that she's very sweet. She's a very sweet, nice, and very shy girl. And she likes to sing, but she has stage fright. And that's the basis of her blade quest. There's not a lot to go into. Because like I said before, her affinity chart takes so long, meaning her blade quest takes so fucking long, that there's a huge gap in between when you start it and you finish it, so you tend to forget the smaller details of the quest because you barely see it. It's one of those things I feel like you would start at the beginning of the game and you might be done like maybe 3/4 into the game. Alright, I'm gonna stop it. Usually people don't know. If you've done that blade quest is traumatizing because of holy shit. But I'm gonna stop. But the other problem with her blade quest is that it doesn't really focus on any of the characters. She doesn't have any specific character interactions that would give me any gleam to what driver she would go to. Now, I would make the blatant suggestion, because she's an Ice Blade, that Senator Tantal with Zeke, since he's from the Frozen Titan. But there's not a lot to go off of that, and if to be honest with you, I think you can honestly do her blade quest. If you wanted to and you wanted to grind the blade quest out, you could probably finish the blade quest as long as you could get to More Ordain, which you aren't even required to have Morag in yet. You don't get Morag until the end of More Ordain's chapter anywho. So my assumption would be is that it would have to be between, at most, Rex, Nia, and Morag, at least Nia and Rex. And if I had to pick, the one that makes the most sense to me is Rex. Which, ironically enough, is the character I got her on in the first place. I got her on Rex, so I feel like I already got her on the canonical driver. And some of you would ask, why? Well, like I said, the main gimmick of her blade quest is her overcoming her shyness. And for better or for worse, Rex's main character trait that everyone likes to bring up is that he's an optimist. He's that guy. And to me, that meshes the best with Ursula. A character who needs confidence has the character who is brimming with this positive mind and outlook on life that would provide her the necessary position to want to go out and do her dreams. Do her dreams? Achieve her dreams. Don't question me. It's Sunday night. It's late. I'm working with the depression that I gotta go back to work. So I think Rex would be the perfect driver for her, period. And because there's no real evidence for anyone else, I think it would be between her and Nia. And Nia, like I said, is more of a mother. Not saying Nia wouldn't do those things, but I think her personality meshes with Rex the best, because Rex would be a very supportive driver. Rex would want her to do better, not only for himself, but for her. So I just think Ursula would make the most sense with Rex. The next we're going to talk about is our pair. And we're going to do these as a twofer because of the nature of them and their stories. Which would be our two blades. I actually would argue these two have some of the best blade quests in the fucking game. Praxis and Theory. There's not a lot to say because I can't really go into either of them blade quest wise because they're huge fucking spoilers. Their blade quests intertwine. Their whole story intertwines. They're also a part of that group of blades that you don't get through core crystals. Well, you do, but the way you obtain Praxis and Theory is through blade quests. You have to do a quest just to get their core, and then on top of that do their unique blade quests. They're a part of that group. I think the only other ones that are like that is like Vess, Sheba, I guess Wolfric and Cassandra are like that. There's a small chunk of blades that you don't get through traditional. I pop open a core crystal, boom, there they go. There's actually a story before you even get them. And these two are it. To me, these two are the poster childs of them. But I can't go into their personalities. Praxis is very hyperactive, very spunky, I guess would be the best way to describe her. And Theory is very cold-hearted and calculated. She's not very expressive, so to speak. And the running gimmick, I can tell you this much, but there's nothing else, and this should give you a basis behind their blade quest, is that their blade quests primarily revolve around the idea of them being like sibling blades. And it's not insanely hard to figure out who would be their driver due to certain hints in their design and in their blade quest. The problem is that there's two ways people tend to throw the Praxis Theory combo. You either do them as a twofer, having them both be on the same driver, or some people have a tendency to do them on separate drivers. Now, if you ask my opinion, I would put them on separate drivers. I think Praxis and Theory, because of their sister-natured relationship, makes more sense for them to be on separate drivers, but I could totally be cool with the idea of them being on the same driver. Now, the question is, what driver would that be? Well, I already know. Personally, I go with the idea of them being split up. And Praxis most definitely is going to Zeke. I think that's not even a question to me. Actually, just to give you another spoiler, Zeke, I would argue, would probably be the best choice for both of them in total. But I'm more inclined, but because I prefer them being on separate drivers, I would say Praxis 100% goes to Zeke. And if we have to do a twofer, they would both go to Zeke, in my opinion. Now, the reason why is this. The first thing is there's a bunch of off-color references to Zeke being her driver anyway. For example, in her side quest, Praxis even mentions her own version of the Eye of Shining Justice, which, if you know, is a running gag with Zeke. Zeke even makes mention of it during that same quest. When she says it, she's like, I'll use my own Eye of Shining Justice on you kids. And Zeke's like, oh, cool, she has her own Eye of Shining Justice. It's like, that tells me, and nothing else, she likes Zeke's personality enough to copy that. And considering Zeke is kind of one of those characters who's cool, but like, only a certain group of people will think he was cool, the fact that Praxis thinks he's cool enough to even adopt a phrase of his, that almost default tells me, okay, cool. Another thing is in their physical design. Praxis and Theory both run the gimmick of having eye patches, having one of their eyes covered and the other eye being open. Who's the driver who also does that? Although Zeke also wears contact lenses, but we don't bring that up. It's kind of crazy that you, in adding, just a side note, in adding these side quests, they've never seen holograms before, but contact lenses is a common thing. That he felt the need to buy them, but that's a whole nother subplot we're not going to get into now. It's not that important. It's just something I thought was kind of funny. But the reason why I bring up the eye patch thing is not only because it shares it, they even make another reference to it in the Blade Quest, where it's like, oh, look, it's another one-eye. And Zeke's like, hey, I'm not a Blade, or I'm not in group with them. They were talking about Theory and Praxis. But once again, he rocks the same look as they do in terms of their eyes, having one eye covered and one eye exposed. And I just think it makes the most sense to have Zeke be Praxis' driver. On top of that, their personalities are very similar. They're both hyperactive and spunky. And they both have their moments where they can be serious. And almost ironically enough, it's kind of like it was with Zeke. When Zeke started getting serious in his conversations and in cutscenes, it was like, that seemed weird. And it's almost the same thing with Praxis. Even Praxis' like general animations, when she gets excited and shit, she has a very bouncy and bubbly animation. I think that totally works with Zeke the best. Even if I exclude the other stuff, I just think her personality meshes well with Zeke's. Now let's get to theory. And it's another theory of it's terrible. Who told you can make jokes like that? They were wrong. Fucking moron. Now theories, general, who would I pick for her driver if I'm going to separate them, makes the most sense. And it's not really hard to guess because her personality actually is just like, just like Zeke and Praxis, her personality meshes the most with Morag's. Also because I think Morag works best because Morag also is a sister herself. So she understands where theory is coming from on a personal level. And they both have the most calm, cold, and like, they're very logic driven, where I would argue Zeke and Praxis are more emotionally driven. I think that meshes well. I think that works for the dynamic. It also leads into what some of the fandom does, which is shipping. And if you haven't seen it, there's enough ships to go around, everybody. Even though we're riding on Titans, we'll just make them Titan ships. We're just shipping around, shipping you with you and you and you and you and you and you. So a lot of people also throw her throw theory with Morag because they also ship Morag and Zeke. That's not my personal reason. My reason is just because Morag already has a sibling understanding, so I think that she could connect with theory a lot. And some people make the argument that they would put the two for Morag because of that too, which definitely works, but still, I think it makes the most sense to put theory, if theory is going to be on a different driver, on Morag. I just think their personalities mesh so well. And shipping, if you want to throw that in as a reason too. So, moving on. I guess the next Blade we can talk about is our Dark Judge of Justice, Percival. Percival's kind of a weird choice here too because his shit doesn't really mesh with anyone specifically. Although I already had an idea in mind just looking at him and finding out that he has a nickname of the Dark Judge of Justice. Percival, for some reason, combines the aesthetics of like a... He's a darkness blade. He's viewed as a tank. He has this whole oath about not killing, which is weird because I think he's the only like rare blade that doesn't have a mouth. So anytime he talks, it's literally they'll do zoom ups of his face and he'll just be like, "I am Percival." Percival's weird because of that. And honestly, I think his is kind of almost a no-brainer because it's weird. If I had to pick, he's another Morag and Zeke situation where I think aesthetically he works best with Zeke, but his personality and his mindset make more sense for Morag. Because Morag, once again, it's a calm and cold kind of person, which is kind of what Percival does. Percival also has a bad habit of running off and doing shit on his own. The difference is unlike other characters who do that, he doesn't get people killed. I wasn't thinking about anything important anyway. So, I would honestly say it's between Morag and Zeke. I don't have a specific answer. But if I had to pick one of those two, I would probably say Zeke. I think Zeke makes the most sense with him. I think Percival comes off as a hero who is very jaded. He's very jaded at the world he lives in and the society he lives in. And even though he can't really justify himself as much as he wants to, he feels the need to do good things. And I think that correlates with Zeke on a personal level because it's shown through heart-to-hearts, not only with Percival, but also with Zeke, that Zeke was a character who was a lot more optimistic and like Rex when he was younger and kind of got smacked in the face with the cold, harsh reality of the world multiple times to now, although he's not jaded, he's way more of a realist, and it kind of takes him out of his goofiness. That's why I think there's such a weird counterbalance between when Zeke is super goofy and super chilled. I think his super goofiness was his original personality, and I think it was the constant reminder that he was nowhere near as good enough as he needed to be to protect everyone, that he has this weird mix now of where he can be super serious and super aware of his situation, but he can also be super goofy. I think it's somewhat similar for Percival, where Percival comes off as a person, especially in his side quest, where you kind of learn somewhat of his previous Blade self history, that Percival may be going through the same thing, more in an evolutionary state though. That he wants to do good things, but he never really figured out the right way of doing them, so he just does them his way and hopes to God that that works. Or maybe he's just gone too far in an opposite direction. Like I said, Percival has an oath of not killing people, which is funny considering his Blade quest, but we'll get into that. Actually, we won't, because we're not doing spoilers here. So moving on. The last rare Blade for today's video is someone that I truly enjoy, because he's an ass. He's a pompous ass, and that's why I love him. It's Dagos! That's not even how... I don't have to pronounce it that way. I just love pronouncing it that way, because he's such a fucking ass. It's that... it's Dagos! Okay, so Dagos' general personality and quirk is that he's an egotistical maniac. This motherfucker thinks he's the highest thing. It's pretty much if Bull Hancock was a dude and didn't know anything about his past. That's it. Because he has this insane level of arrogance, views himself to be a fucking king, but like he has no basis for that understanding. He just believes it to be true without any sort of proof. Actually, that's what his Blade quest is about, is you finding out what the truth of his origin is, or if there is one at all. You find out when you do the Blade quest. And god damn it, I love him. To me, he hits me right on that Inaru Sail vibe, where he's such a fucking piece of shit because he's a goddamn he's so conceited. He's such a cocky piece of shit. I love him for it. You can do this shit and be entertaining as fuck, and Dagos is entertaining as fuck with being a cocky piece of shit. Some people do it and they're fucking garbage, but if you do it right, you get to be on Sail, Inaru, and now Dagos level. Now with him being a cocky piece of shit, the question then becomes, who's the best driver to deal with a cocky piece of shit? And all things considered, I probably would say I would put Dagos on Nia, because Nia don't play that shit. Now, granted, I don't think at all I've ever seen Dagos get called out, or at least not get like backed into a corner emotionally. But Nia would be the character that would constantly check his ass. Even if there is no ever wavering of spirits in that, I imagine Nia would never let him get away with nothing. It'd be literally every time he opened his fucking mouth, Nia would have some sort of retort. Regardless of the situation, she would have some sort of retort, and I love that. Also, because I think Nia is a good counter to him. They're in thematically, but I can't get into that because it gets into spoilers, and I don't want to talk about it. But I think Nia would be a great counter for Dagos, personality-wise, because Morag, he just couldn't put up with his shit. Like, I honestly think Morag would not be able to put up with his shit. Zeke, it's almost Zeke and Rex is almost the same issue. I think they would be a little bit too complacent with him. Considering how much Pandoria can get away with Zeke, I imagine Dagos would take that to some next level shit. And some people would say, well, why do you group that? Especially because even in the heart-to-hearts he doesn't really have one specifically with Nia. No, but Nia is present, and I think Nia, personality-wise, just makes the most sense. That Nia wouldn't let him get away with his shit. Nia would constantly be checking that man. Be like, yeah, you the dick. You the dick. I fucking love that. So those are my next 5. So, in part 3, we'll be addressing some more Blades, and hopefully less trauma will happen, but, you know, we'll see how life plays, because you never know what life may bring. I feel like that's a reference to something. It probably is. I can't remember what, though. Cannot remember what.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brett Keane.